Hello everybody, welcome to the final weekend of DTM 2024. We're here at the Hockenheimring, ready for the first of two free practice sessions today, and with the championship on a knife's edge. Three drivers coming into the weekend capable of winning the title, and for all three of them it will be their first ever championship crown in the DTM. Mirko Bortolotti arrives here as the championship leader after an excellent weekend last time out at the Red Bull Ring with a win and a fourth. And he's got 204 points, 15 points clear of Kelvin van der Linde, who was, of course, a championship frontrunner in his first season of DTM in 2021. He came into that final weekend in 2021, which was held at the Norris Ring back in that year, as the driver second in the championship there as well. He's got a 15-point gap to try and overhaul. And do not rule out Maro Engel, who's third in the championship on 184 points, 20 points behind Mirko Bortolotti and 5 behind Kelvin van der Linde. 20 points between all three of them, and we've got 56 points still available this weekend. 25 points for each race win, one on Saturday, one on Sunday, and of course you get the crucial 3 bonus points potentially for pole position in each of the qualifying sessions as well. It is a typical October day here in that it's quite dull and overcast. It's not actually that cool. It's around about 14 degrees, which is around about the average for this time of year. But it has, about 5 minutes before we came on air, just started to drizzle a little bit, and that's got a little bit heavier over the last couple of minutes as well. So it's been declared a wet session, but it's not really wet at the moment. It's more damp. The forecast is that we can have 1 or 2 showers today. Nothing too major, but it will be a little bit showery today. However, it should be dry on Saturday and dry on Sunday. There on the screen you can see confirmation of the championship standings. Just the 3 that can win the title: Bortolotti, van der Linde and Maro Engel. With Kelvin van der Linde having lost the championship lead last time out at the Red Bull Ring with an 8th and a 5th, struggling with the car at the Red Bull Ring with its high altitude, and the Audi, not one of the turbocharged cars, a normally aspirated car. They say the same about the Lamborghini, struggling there with BOP as well, and finishing 8th and 5th in the 2 races there. Maro Engel had a mixed weekend, a 2nd place finish on the first race on Saturday and an 8th place finish on the Sunday. There then is the steely blue-eyed gaze of the man that comes into the weekend as the championship leader in his 3rd full season of the contest. He's led the championship before 2 years ago, and he's always been involved in the championship fight at some stage across the course of a season, but this is his best season yet. He's had just the 1 win, and that came last time out the Red Bull Ring. He's had 4 second place finishes and a 3rd, 6 podiums in total, but he's been mega consistent as well, with points scoring finishes in every single round of the championship so far. The same is true of actually his 2 rivals. Both Kelvin van der Linde and Maro Engel have also finished in the points in all of the races. 2 wins for Kelvin van der Linde. For Maro Engel, yet to get his first win of the season, but he's had 5 podiums. 5 second place finishes, 2 third place finishes, and in total 7 podiums this year. There then you can see the rain from the camera overlooking the pit lane starting to come down heavier, and there you can see a new name above the garage. Jules Gounon has stepped in last minute to replace Lucas Stolz at HRT, because Luca's unwell, unfortunately. So our very best wishes to Luca, who's had another strong season in the championship. He came into the weekend, would have come into the weekend 9th in the championship standings, having finished 6th last year and 6th in 2022. But he's unwell, so Jules Gounon, who is a gun driver and could be very useful for Mercedes this weekend, that steps in and makes his DTM debut. So then the cars nosing out of the garages. We're here in the commentary box overlooking the start-finish line and the exit to the final corner. This great circuit, which was first built in 1932, used to be 12 kilometres long, used to go way out into the woods and be hugely quick. It's still quick, but much shorter these days, 4.574 kilometres. But the cars, the DTM cars, will get up to around about 265 kilometres an hour top speed here. It's a quick track, and we're going to have some great racing, but we are going to have a wet first free practice session, which will be a cat amongst the pigeons. The clock gets underway, the cars head out of the pit lane. My name's Chris Hartley, and in the commentary box alongside me to talk you through this final weekend of 2024, it's good morning to Brian Oliver.
Good morning, Chris. Good morning, everybody who's watching us from around the world. I know there is a lot of anticipation for this, the final round of the season for the DTM. Always a great atmosphere at the Hockenheimring, but a very tense atmosphere as well. And, as already mentioned, a very wet atmosphere. We had a lot of wet running at the Red Bull Ring. When I looked at the forecast this week, I thought it was going to be dry over this weekend, but just goes to show we know nothing. Hoping this will be the only wet session. Be interested to see how many teams do go out and do push during this free practice session, because forecast suggests it might stay dry for the rest of the weekend. So is there going to be information to be gathered? Well, I think you can never get too much testing in DTM. A lot of drivers will want to get out, gather data, which is what we're seeing at the moment. You can see headlights are alight, the windscreen wipers are going, the mist is in the air properly. Feels like autumn is here.
Yeah, absolutely. It's only a few weeks since the Red Bull Ring. Mind you, it was pretty cool there compared to what we normally get weather-wise. It was down to single figures at the Red Bull Ring. We had some rain there as well. We've had rain every weekend this year. It's been the wettest year I can remember. But it's definitely feeling very autumnal here. So the cars slip and slide their way through out onto the track. To give you an idea of lap times, we can give you wet and dry lap times around here, because last year, actually, the first free practice session was wet. Kelvin van der Linde looks very wet out the back, actually, much wetter than it does here on the start-finish line. But the first free practice session last year, Kelvin van der Linde in the wet set a lap time of 1 minute 53.499. He was the quickest in the wet on Friday, and he was quickest in the dry session in the afternoon last year as well. That was a 1 minute 38.591. Qualifying lap record around here, held by Lucas Auer 2 years ago. He set that in the Mercedes, 1 minute 36.479 seconds. The title contenders then coming into the weekend, their form here at Hockenheim since 2021, since the GT3 era of DTM began. Mirko Bortolotti has had 4 races here. He's had 1 second, 1 fifth, 1 seventh and 1 DNF. So not bad, but he hasn't had a win as yet. But he gets a second place finish here last year, fighting, of course, with Thomas Preining for the championship title. Kelvin van der Linde has had 6 races here since 2021. He's had 1 win, that was in 2021. He's had a 5th, a 6th, a 10th, a 12th, and a 25th place finish, which was the last race of last year. So fairly mixed bag for Kelvin here. And Maro Engels had 4 races since 2021. He's had a 5th, an 11th, a 17th and a DNF. Not a good record. And actually here last year, Brian, Lucas Stoltz, who's absent this weekend, in race 1 was the only Mercedes driver to get in the points with an 8th place finish. He got better on Sunday. Maro Engel actually almost got a podium until a bolt failed on his suspension on the last lap of the race and he dropped down to 5th place. But that will be a slight concern to the Mercedes drivers. The form here wasn't that great, particularly on Saturday.
No, and they'll probably be hoping that the rain continues, because the weather is very much the great leveller. But yes, Mercedes very much looking to rectify that here at the season closer this weekend. Having said that, I mean, Lucas Stoltz, we know how good he is, a phenomenal driver, but they've got another phenomenal driver in the seat of that car in the shape of Jules Gounon, the previous champion in ADAC GT Masters, so he's done a fair few laps around here. He won the ADAC GT Masters Championship in 2017. He's a 2 times Spa 24-hour winner as well. A very welcome addition to the ranks of the DTM. Be interesting to see if he could do something with that Mercedes to move them up the order and maybe score something close to a win.
Yeah, and we can hear from the man himself now, Jules Gounon, Team Radio.
I cannot hear you. Box this lap, box this lap.
And indeed he is coming into the pit lane. I can see from the commentary box window. So Jules Gounon comes in. That's part of what pre-practice is about, really, just testing the systems, checking things over the first time out on track. So Jules Gounon comes in, as Brian says, a former ADAC GT Masters champion. He's won the Spa 24-hour race twice. He's won the Bathurst 12-hour race twice as well in 2020. And 2022, in fact 3 times. He won it last year as well in 2023. GT World Challenge European Endurance Cup champion with Mercedes alongside Raffaele Marciello and Timur Bogolovsky in 2023. He won that championship in 2022 with Raffaele Marciello and former DTM racer Daniel Huncadella as well. So he's a terrific driver, Jules Gounon, and he'll be well versed in driving these Mercedes GT3 cars. has actually been a winner here at Hockenheim as well. The year he won the GT Masters Championship, he had a win and a second. It was the final round of their season. Here's a driver who knows how to win around Hockenheim. He was the star driver last year. He's gone wide there, though. Thomas Preining, so just misses the apex on the way into turn 2 at the Nordkurve, but don't worry, there's lots of runoff area there. But you're right on board with the reigning champion, the outgoing champion. He can't now win the title, but Thomas Preining was absolutely phenomenal here 12 months ago, wasn't he, in a championship fight with Mirko Bortolotti and Riccardo Feller, and he did everything right. 2 pole positions, 2 race wins.
Yes, they stepped up a gear, if that were possible, at the last round. Found something, dug deep, and Thomas Preining was, well, I'd almost say dominant last year at the final weekend of the season, and won that championship in fine style. It was a great celebration at the end. Of course, we had all the drivers doing the donuts on the exit of the final corner, turn 17 as well, and really showing off to the crowd. We're hoping some of that tomorrow. But yes, Thomas Preining, who will be handing the trophy over to one of 3 other drivers, but very much here for glory. Most certainly will be looking for a race win. We'll be looking to take some silverware home at the end of this weekend.
Rob Pereira once again standing in for Christian Engelhardt. So Christian's basically missed the second half of the season. He was first replaced at the Norrisring, had a knee operation, and he's not been able to get back up to full fitness since. So Christian has been at events in a role of kind of showing a team playing role, an ambassador role almost, showing people around garages and giving tours and so forth, but he hasn't been in the car for half a season now. So the very able Rob Pereira stepping in once again. He's quickest so far in the wet with a 1 minute 50.171 second lap. Now there was a private test, or a couple of days of private tests here last week. The rule this year is that each driver can only do 5 days of testing outside of a DTM weekend, so only 5 days of private testing. And there was a test last Tuesday, a test last Thursday, and in the wet, it was looking good for the Grasser Lamborghinis because it was wet on the Tuesday. Luca Engstler was quickest with a 150.4, and Rob Pereira was second with a 150.515 in his Lamborghini. You're on board now with Maro Engel, who's certainly no stranger to being very quick in wet weather conditions, and we can say already it's been a good week for Maro Engel and for Lucas Auer, because they're already champions, Maro Engel and Lucas Auer. Massive congratulations to both of them, and to Team Winward, because they won the GT World Challenge Europe Sprint Cup Championship with a 3rd and 4th place finish at Barcelona last weekend. Teams champions for Winward, and drivers champions for their first time for Maro Engel and his teammate Lucas Auer. So that was great success for them. There was a Gold Cup victory as well for Luca Engstler. So some drivers rounding off a busy season of dual campaigns with a good success story there. And here is then the driver that's going for it this weekend, Kelvin van der Linde. He's got that experience of 2021 behind him, and he's already talked about the fact that he's grown as a driver since 2021. We'll talk more about that in a moment. Let's hear from the man himself.
P2, we're missing 2.8 tenths to Pereira.
Yep, so just giving an update on his pace at the moment. Kelvin van der Linde's best lap time, a 150.456. He's 7 tenths down on the best lap time, which is now Luca Engstler, 149.761. Rob Pereira second, Mirko Bortolotti third. Told you the Lamborghinis were looking pretty handy in the wet. At first, second and third at the moment. Bortolotti goes third. Preining's down to 4th. Kelvin van der Linde and his teammate Riccardo Feller down to 5th and 6th. But both of them on quick laps here. But yeah, that difficult and disappointing end to the 2021 season when Kelvin van der Linde had a chance of the championship title. It all went wrong. The big battle between him and a driver who's going to be racing in Formula 1 this weekend, Liam Lawson. And our best wishes to Liam in his time with RB Racing. It's about time he got a chance at a string of races in Grand Prix racing, Formula 1 racing. But they were the drivers, Brian, going for the title. And in the end, it was the other driver that snuck through and won it with 2 race wins from 3rd place in the championship, Maxi Goods.
Yes, Maxi Goetze, what a legend he is. We'd love to see him back in DTM one day. Kelvin van der Linde was looking like a man under pressure at the Red Bull Ring, but he's certainly reversing that with what he's been saying this week. He says, actually, the pressure is very much on Mirko Bortolotti. He says it's not a nice feeling being the hunted. And he does recognise it's a big mental game to stay calm, and it's not easy to keep on top of it, but he really feels that the pressure is no longer on him because he is now the hunter, and Bortolotti has all of the pressure as the hunted. And I think Kelvin van der Linde, you know, very much getting himself into that mental place where he's not putting that pressure on himself, and he can push for that title challenge.
Yeah, and this will be a big day today, really, to find out where they're at in terms of the pace. I think big part of the problem at the Norris Ring of that championship decider was he knew he hadn't got the pace, really, to fight Liam Lawson's Ferrari around the Norris Ring. So he went for it at the start of both races, and we pulled off the moves. He would have been glorious moves, and everybody had been raving about how good the moves were, and he might have won the championship, but they didn't quite come off. But it was kind of him knowing, I think, that was his only chance of getting through, and the rest is history, and everybody has their viewpoint on it. But it was a driver going for a move, which is what you got to do at the end of the day. Try and get an overtake, try and win a race. And if your only chance, you think realistically of doing that, is at the start of the race, then that's understandable. But if you are in a car which is quick, the team which is quick around a circuit like Hockenheim, where he has won in the past, then, you know, you've got a chance across the course of the whole weekend. You don't have to necessarily desperately go for it at the start of the race. But he'll only know that today, really, once we've got, well, session 2 out of the way, because session 1 looks like it's going to be wet. Let's go on board with Mirko Bortolotti.
See blocking in free practice, I don't get it, honestly. Well, okay.
Playing about somebody blocking in free practice. Is he behind? Let's have a look at the track map.
He is behind Jack Aitken on the track.
Just overtaken Sheldon Fan. He's quite a long way behind Jack, isn't he? So
Yeah.
just overtaken Sheldon, maybe.
Maybe, yeah.
And then Lucas Auer is the one behind him. But yeah. Anyway, sort of a quibble, a complaint, but he's not getting too wound up. And Mirko is a cool customer, isn't he? And that is going to be a huge weapon in his armour this weekend.
Yeah, the other thing that Mirko Bortolotti will know, and Kelvin van der Linde will know, is that actually Kelvin's on 2 reprimands, and if he gets another one, he will get either a grid drop, or if it's the last race, he will get a time penalty, a 5-second time penalty in the race. Whereas Mirko Bortolotti is on 1 reprimand, so he has a bit of breathing room. Maro Engel is on 0 reprimands, so Kelvin van der Linde will have that in mind. One of the areas you can pick up reprimands is not just issues with contact with another car or blocking, but also track limits. And during GT Masters and during the start of this session, I've been looking at the timing screens, and it's scrolling like mad because track limit infringements have been popping up right, left and centre, very much as we had at the Red Bull Ring. We've already had probably 10 or so track limit infringements during this session in the few minutes it's been running. They've all been at turn 1. And if Kelvin van der Linde does exceed track limits in turn 1 and he does pick up a reprimand, that could be a championship losing situation.
Yeah, certainly something he's got to be mindful of, but not play too much on his mind. He's got to be aware of it, but he can't be too cautious either. He's got to close a 15-point gap, which is not going to be the easiest of tasks. He's quickest at the moment, though, isn't he, in the Audi? His teammate, Ricardo Fella's going pretty well as well, 3rd quickest. So we've got the top 4 into the 149s now. 149.4 for Kelvin van der Linde, a 149.7 for Von Pereira. Only 12 thousandths behind him is Ricardo Fella, and then a 149.76, only 3 thousandths behind Ricardo Fella is Luca Engstler, who's had a few track limits penalties. There is Ayhan Guad, and he's on a personal best lap at the moment in the bright green Manthey EMA Porsche. Where's his teammate at the moment? Thomas Brunning slipped back to 8th place. My engine's currently in 5th position, having a much better second half of the season than first, where he couldn't buy any good luck, only seemed to get bad luck. The Turkish driver, rapid as we know he is, goes over the line. It's another decent lap, 149.898. He stays 5th quickest. Lucas Auer has just moved up to 6th, and Jack Aitken has just moved up to 7th. And Mirko Bortolotti crosses the line, and he's gone into the 149s now as well, so up to 5th place. for Mirko. So Kelvin van der Linde in the Audi, as he did last year. It was wetter conditions last year, as I say, the best lap time in a pretty wet free practice one last year, set by Kelvin van der Linde in the wet 1:53.4, and we're going 4 seconds a lap quicker than that now. So you'd say it's wet, but not really wet at the moment, as Scott Pereira pushes on and looks like he's going to improve his personal best lap time as well. Big weekend this for Abt Sportsline, Brian, because the end of an era, 25 years together with Audi. Since the very beginning, the 2000 season, they've got one of their race cars, the distinctive bright yellow livery of the TTR, on display in the paddock this weekend from their first season in the DTM with Audi. But that all comes to an end because at the Red Bull Ring last time out, the team announced they're going to be back next year, but back with Lamborghinis, and it'd be quite fitting, wouldn't it, if they could end on a high with Audi this weekend and maybe win the championship title with Kelvin van der Linde.
And beat a Lamborghini. Oh, how well that would go down. Yes, it is the end of an era, isn't it? I mean, it's the last time we're going to see Audi for Abt. Potentially the last time we're going to see Kelvin van der Linde or Ricardo Feller behind the wheel of an Audi. Potentially the last time we're going to see an Audi in DTM. Of course, Audi very much turning their focus to Formula One, not so much on GT racing, and they will be sorely missed. Their presence will be. I think we'll still see them a bit in maybe GT Masters. But yes, very much feeling like an end of an era. And they would love it if Abt could score them a title as they move away from them. Yes, Lamborghini want to do something about that in the hands of Mirko Bortolotti.
Yeah, and it's, you know, the relationship is still strong. They've still said they'll work together going forward, not necessarily running the cars, but they've still got this working relationship. It's very much a friendly parting of ways, and it boils down to the fact that Audi aren't able these days to put as much factory support into providing the the backup for the team that they were, because they're a foray into Formula One, which is coming up. And so Lamborghini's the way to go. It's also a pretty old car now, that Audi R8, isn't it? But what a partnership they have had together. 77 victories in 331 races to date, 258 podiums, 91 pole positions, and 86 fastest laps. So the most successful DTM team, Abt Sportsline. It's quite the record, that, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it's 16 out of 24 seasons. Abt have had at least one driver in the top 3 in the championship, and they've done that in every season since 2021. So it's pretty phenomenal, really, isn't it? Whatever happens this weekend, it's been truly a great partnership.
Yeah, I mean, that's a hell of a return rate, isn't it? You get the percentages on that, and that is very, very good indeed. Yes, and the Audi car, as you say, it's been around for a few years, has been very strong, was very much the weapon of choice in GT Masters for several years. And of course, Kelvin van der Linde, along with Patrick Niederhauser, won the GT Masters Championship in an Audi R8 in 2019. So he knows what it's like to win in one of those cars and to win a championship. And what a swan song it would be if they could do it this weekend.
There's a man who knows how to win a championship. Sheldon van der Linde, younger brother of Kelvin, and champion of DTM in 2022. Interestingly, once we left the Red Bull Ring and none of the Schubert drivers remained in contention for the championship, René Rast, he's only actually a point out of that window. So he's 4th in the championship, 57 behind, but with only 56 up for grabs. But interestingly, they then last minute cancelled the private test at Hockenheim. So Schubert thinking, well, not win the championship, we won't spend the time and the money, I guess, coming and testing. So they were notable by their absence, the BMWs, last week during the tests. One thing to mention as well is that on the Tuesday, as I said, it was wet. That's when Bortolotti did his test. But Thursday, it started wet, but then it was dry in the afternoon, which was when van der Linde did his test. So he's got a bit more dry data than has Mirko. Of course, everybody was here at the start of the season, pre-season, for the pre-season tests in the dry.
Yes, so we know how quick they are in the dry, and they certainly felt after the test they might have an advantage with the forecast of being dry for this weekend. Well, how's that forecast looking now? But I'm not entirely sure how much we're going to learn in this session, because without wishing to keep going on about the weather, but I do feel as though this may be the only wet session of the weekend. So Kelvin van der Linde, we already know that the Abt Sportsline Audi is very, very quick on those wet weather tyres, and the tyre whisperer himself, Kelvin van der Linde, is very rapid on those wet weather tyres here. So kind of no surprise to see him at the top of the timesheets at the moment. It'll be interesting to see where that changes in the dry. Look who's behind him, though, on the timing screens. Just 0.133 behind Mirko Bortolotti, currently P2. A driver who's also fairly useful in the wet, Luca Engsler in P3 at 149.588. So we got a bit of off-roading from Clemens Schmidt, so we're learning how the McLaren goes on grass. Let's see how it goes on tarmac as well.
Yeah, that was coming out of turn 12, the Mobil 1 curve. That's the one that always catches them out. So it's just going into the final sector, the final stadium arena. It's more or less a 90-degree right-hander. They go into it at about 220 kilometres an hour, fourth gear, and they not that much speed off. They're still going through it pretty rapidly at 165 kilometres an hour. So it's easy to run wide, and if you run wide, you're very quickly sucked out onto the grass there. So Clemens Schmidt. No damage to the car, I think, but obviously ruining that lap. Good to read that Rainer Durr, the team boss of Durr Motorsport, and the McLarens, who are in their first season of DTM, has said, look, we're committed to coming back next year. We've already got all the sponsors agreeing that they're going to come back on board with us. It's a 3-year plan. And even though it's been a tough first season in DTM, you know, we're still happy with the progress that we're making. We definitely want to come back. And you know, we've got a lot of data in the butts now, because you know they've had to get all their setups and learn all their setups for every track with that car this year. And as Rainer Durr says, you know, if you're a second off the pace in most championships, it maybe puts you at the back end of the top 10. If you're a second off the pace in the DTM, it puts you right at the back of the grid.
Yeah, it was great to read that, wasn't it? Yeah, they have said this is a learning year. This has been a learning year. As we look again, it's Marco Wittmann coming into 16 and 17, and there at the top of your screen you can see that moment for Clemens Schmidt. But yes, they've had to learn everything. It's the first time we've seen a McLaren in DTM. They've been learning everything that there is to learn, not just on track, but also performance pit stops, because Durr Motorsport, that was a new discipline for them as well, learning how to get the car in and out of the pits in a short time, and that doesn't get any easier to watch. Even on board, you can hear all the gravel. They're going to spend probably the next hour extracting all the gravel from the car in the pits, I should think.
You can see on the exit to the gravel, where it then turns back to grass, how muddy the grass was as well, which shows how many people have already been off there before we got to this session. So don't worry, Clemens, because you ain't going to be the last one to go off of that corner this weekend, I don't think. Kelvin van der Linde and Mirko Bortolotti, the two big championship contenders, first and second at the moment, with Kelvin into the 148s, the only one into the 148s with a 148.888. Here he is now. Mirko Bortolotti still out on track as well, only a tenth of a second between them. Then the next four drivers in the order, Luca Engsler, Ayhan Nguyen, Ron Pereira, Thomas Preining, have all gone into the pits. Third to sixth. Ricardo Feller in the Audi is seventh. Jules Gounon, welcome Jules. Best Mercedes, he's in eighth place. It's no surprise he's going quickly. It might be his DTM debut, but we know how rapid he is, the 29-year-old Frenchman. And then Lucas Sauer and Jack Aitken round out the top 10.
Yeah, I told you Jules was good, didn't I? And like that is news to anybody. I've been waiting for him to join the ranks at DTM for years, and it's about time. I really hope that we will see him again in a future season. I know Jordan Pepper, he got a taste for it at Saxon, and he's like, right, I found out what it's like. I want to come back. And I'm hoping Jules will feel the same as well. Of course, we have no confirmation of who will be on the grid next year. It's too early for that. Although, since we last spoke, we have had confirmation of the calendar, which is great. Good to know where we're going next year. Very similar to this year. So the ADAC very much sticking with a formula that they know is popular with the drivers, with the teams, and with the fans.
Yeah, there was talk about a different track, maybe Vallelunga in Portugal, a street track, maybe going out to Austria for a second meeting in Austria at the Salzburg Ring. But in the end, and you know, confirmation with the teams as well, I think we decided to stick with the current, not exact calendar, because there's some changes to weeks and things, but the same tracks on the calendar, with most of the races being in Germany, a few fly-away races, and it's, you know, trying to keep the cost down for teams as well. Difficult times for everybody financially, and it can be conceived as quite an expensive trip to go to another fly-away race. So I think something that might be on the cards going forwards, but for now we'll stick with the same tracks that we've had in 2024 for 2025, with Mirko Bortolotti, you can see on board on a track which is picking up less spray now. Still bit of spray coming off the back of the car. See Maro Engel coming into the last 2 turns at 16 and 17. Still a reasonable amount of spray coming off the back of his Mercedes, but you've seen the lap times coming down, and it's getting to a very greasy rather than wet sort of stage on track now.
Yes, you're not really getting dry data or wet data in this, are you?
No, it's completely useless. No, it's not completely useless. You never know.
No.
Every time it's been predicted that we're not going to get any rain today, we get some rain, get a shower, and it gets greasy. And you know, if you've got that data in the bank, and this happens in qualifying or the race, at least you know where you stand. Should we talk about the dreaded BOP, balance of performance?
I'm just going to go and sit down in the corner, but wake me up when it's over.
OK. So I've looked at what we had last year and what we've got this year at Hockenheim. We can compare what we had at Red Bull Ring, but I think it's more relevant to compare the same track and the BOP there. So weight-wise, for this weekend, the Audis have got 45 kilograms of balance of performance weight. Now, last year at Hockenheim, Saturday they had 50 kilograms, Sunday they had 55, so they're better off. They're lighter, the Audis, than they were last year. They're 5 kilograms lighter than the start of 2023 at Hockenheim, and they're actually 10 kilograms lighter than they were on the Sunday. BMWs have got 40 kilograms of BOP weight. That's exactly the same as they had here at Hockenheim last year. Ferrari's 30 kilograms of BOP weight, exactly the same as last year. Lamborghini's 95 kilograms of weight. It is a lighter car though, so overall that sounds like a lot, but it's the same weight they had on the Sunday here last year. Mirko Bortolotti finished on the podium here on the Sunday last year with a second place finish. So 95 kilograms on board the Lamborghini. They had 80 kilograms on the Saturday last year, 95 kilograms on the Sunday. McLaren's obviously new to 2024 to the grid, so 50 kilograms for them. A Mercedes, 40 kilograms of BOP weight, same as last year. Porsche's in between what they had last year, so they got 70 kilograms. Last year on the Saturday they had 60, and then after a pretty dominant performance on the Saturday for Thomas Priding, that was upped on the Sunday last year to 75 kilograms. They're a bit lighter than that, but they are 10 kilograms heavier than they were on the Sunday. And then in terms of air restrictors or boost, the Audis have got a slightly bigger air restrictor, only 0.5 millimetre, but a bit more air intake, so a bit more power to them. 2 36.5mm restrictors. Last year, 36mm restrictors here. And Mercedes, same, they're 0.5 millimetre bigger on the restrictors, so 35mm restrictors rather than 34.5.
You talk to the teams, you talk to the drivers, they all feel as though the BOP is balanced against them. There's never a driver who says, do you know what, the BOP's really worked in our favour this weekend. But it is brilliant. It means that we can go racing with all these different brands. The man responsible for the BOP is a gentleman called Claude Simon. And he's a Belgian who heads up the technical department of SRO. He stays very much in the background. He doesn't speak to the media. Don't blame him. He says the data is not always transferable between series because GT World Challenge use tyre warmers, for instance. But he says as the drivers are all pro, every minute detail makes a big difference. The rule is that all cars need to be within 1/10 of a second of each other, whereas in other series, they tend to look at about 3/10. But because the drivers are all at such a high level in DTM, they want them to be within 1/10 of each other. But there's a lot to take into account. You've got the BMW that doesn't heat the tyres up very well, same with Audi. So much to balance out. You've got the front engine, rear engine, turbo, naturally aspirated. But it works because so often we see the field separated by less than a second.
But you'll never, ever, ever keep everybody happy.
Never.
Ever. So I know Audi and Abt were pretty down on the BOP at the Red Bull Ring. Martin Tomczyk, the team principal at Abt, former DTM champion himself, of course, was quite vocal in a news article. He said, unfortunately, from a sporting point of view, this was not a DTM weekend as we would imagine it. There was no equality of opportunity amongst the different brands. For us, it's very annoying because we have lost lots of points in the title fight. But then Mirko Bortolotti, on the flip side, said, well, the direct competition from Mercedes and Audi was that they had more power than us before the weekend. The Audi in particular was extremely light compared to us and has a huge advantage in that regard. And then Kelvin van der Linde reacted to that when he was told what Mirko said. He said, did he really say that? I could only laugh at that. The last 4 weekends that weren't completely wet, we have been completely screwed on the Saturday, said Kelvin van der Linde. You can see that in the results. Our consistency, he said, is a real disgrace. So, you know, on both sides of the coins, they're saying, well, we're worse off on the BOP than them. Fact of the matter is, Brian, that on Saturday, if you're on the podium, you're happy. If you're not on the podium, you're not happy.
Yeah, and if you're on the podium, the BOP is great. And if you're not, then it's working against you. So, yeah, absolutely. But it's a necessary evil. And you look on forums, you talk to drivers, you talk to fans. Everybody's like, oh, the BOP stacked against me, oh, the BOP. But it is the necessary evil. This is why we can go racing with such a great variety of manufacturers. And it does work, and it's the same for GT Masters, for GT4, and for all the GT series around the world. Is exactly the same, and it does work, and it means we can see some great racing.
Yeah, final thing to say on the BOP is that the boost on the turbo-powered BMWs has been tweaked up a bit. It's particularly low and mid-range compared to what they had last year. René Rast last year qualified almost at the back of the grid, 23rd on the grid on Sunday. He did quite well in the race, though. He came through and finished third. So they got that right. But qualifying has definitely been an Achilles heel for the Schubert BMWs this season as well. You saw on screen a couple of minutes ago as Maro Engel comes into the pits, currently only in 13th quickest and a second and a half off the best pace in this session. You saw on screen the team points, because it's not just the Drivers' Championship that's up for grabs this weekend. Schubert Motorsport lead the team's standings. They've got a 39-point advantage over Abt Sportsline and a 52-point advantage over Winward, who are third, and SSR Performance are fourth and 56 points adrift, and Team HRT are fifth and 70 points adrift, and all of them could mathematically still win it because your top two cars count, and therefore 90 points still available. Because if you get a win and a second, you get 45 points in each race. There are no points for qualifying for the team's championship. So 39 points for Schubert, a fairly healthy lead, but certainly not an unassailable lead, with 90 points still up for grabs. So they are still in contention, still leading that one, Schubert's Motorsport. Manthey EMA out of contention. They're the team that won it last year. Also the Drivers' Championship for Thomas Preining. They are, though, winning the Pit Stop Challenge, Manthey EMA. You get 3 points for the fastest pit stop in a race, 2 for second fastest and 1 for third. And Manthey leading that one, 27 points to 24 points for Winward. Only 3 between them. They're the two that could win it. They've both been brilliant at their pit stops this year. And then the Manufacturers' Championship, that's a 4-way fight coming into the final round. Again, 90 points still up for grabs, as Mirko Bortolotti goes quickest now with a 148.775. Mercedes have got 384 points. Lamborghini are 24 behind, 47 behind a BMW, and 83 behind our Audi. So looks like, you know, mathematically BMW and Audi can still do it, but realistically it's looking like Mercedes and Lamborghini fighting for the Manufacturers' Championship as well. So that's all to keep an eye on. The maths get quite complicated in that, because you can completely ignore the points that are scored by anything other than the top two cars in that brand. So, for example, if there were 4 Mercedes in the top 10, you'd only count the points of the first 2. So it gets quite difficult to work out as the race goes on. Mirko Bortolotti then, quickest, so championship leader quickest. Kelvin van der Linde, second in the championship, second quickest, 0.013 seconds between them. Bortolotti on track, van der Linde in the pits.
I'm pleased you're doing the maths, because I haven't got a clue, really. I mean, if that doesn't show. There is Mirko Bortolotti. So first and second in the championship, first and second in the timing at the moment. Oh, this is looking good. Mirko Bortolotti, let's hear from Team Radio.
Final let me drive.
Nope, negative. You have to box. You have to box now, no discussion.
He's going to stay on the track. I'm enjoying myself. No, Mirko.
No,
that's enough.
That was go to your room and do your homework. Into the pit lane. The track's not getting any drier. We saw that shot just now at turn 17. It looks very greasy. On the outside of turn 17, there is a part of the old drag strip. Is it the old? I think it's still used as a drag strip. It is like ice. If you try and walk on it, it is properly slippery. If the drivers run wide on 16 or 17, that is self-policing. because you are really going to go backwards. Very, very slippery out there. And with the water on it as well, no adhesion at all. So you really don't want to be exceeding track limits on those final 2 corners. Turn 1, a long list of drivers who have exceeded track limits. Luca Engstler has had more than everybody else added together, so he's clearly pushing hard. He's in P4 at the moment. He is 0.323, so a little over 0.3 of a second slower than Mirko Bortolotti, but that's how hard he is pushing.
Anjan Nguyen went 3rd quickest with his most recent lap about 30 seconds ago, 1:49.265 for the Turkish driver, just under half a second adrift of Mirko Bortolotti. There's Mirko's teammate, Nicky Thiem, the Norrisring race winner, the Dane in the number 94 car. And Mirko would certainly welcome some support out on track from his teammate this weekend, if possible. Kelvin van der Linde will be hoping for the same from his teammate, Ricardo Feller. And Maro Engel, of course, will be hoping for some support from his teammate and co-championship winner of the GT World Challenge Europe, Lucas Auer. No team orders, though, technically are allowed. But, of course, if you are on the same team as somebody, you're going to, you know, even if you're just taking points away from a rival, that's going to be helpful, isn't it?
Yes, I mean, yes, as you say, not allowed the team orders, but everybody knows what needs to be done, don't they? And Jules Gounon in car number 4 for Team HRT. He is the quickest of the Mercedes, and he'll be aware that fellow Mercedes and very good friend is 3rd in the championship. But again, he's not actually can do anything to help that. But there'll be data that will be gathered by the Mercedes as well as they're going around. And it's not just in DTM, because we've got GT Masters here this weekend and a number of the teams running in both championships. So in the DTM and in the GT Masters. And although the pilots are not able to race in the GT Masters as well, there's a lot of data that is gathered from the GT Masters cars which are identical, which can be transferred and often perceived to be something of an advantage if you've got a car in GT Masters and in DTM on the same weekend especially.
As ever, the lap's divided into 3 parts, 3 sectors. Sector 1 is the shortest sector. That runs from the start-finish line through turn 1, the Nordkurve, which in the dry is 180 kilometres an hour right-hander, through turns 2 and 3, which are taken in 2nd gear and down to 80 kilometres an hour. And coming out of turns 2, 3 and 4, quick sequence of corners, that's where sector 1 ends. So that only at the moment in the wet at least takes around about 24 seconds, 24 and a half seconds. Ricardo Feller has been the quickest through sector 1 with a 24.442. The second sector is much longer in terms of time. It's taken up about half the lap, takes over 49 seconds in these current conditions. Mirko Bortolotti, he's been the quickest in sector 2, so that takes in the mighty Parabolica. So as you come out of turns 3 and 4, you go onto a back straight, and then you go into a big sweeping left-hand curve, absolutely flat out. Stand on the brakes for the Spitzkehrer. The hairpin at turn 6, the slowest corner down to 55 kilometres an hour. And then coming out of there, you accelerate past the penalty zone, which is going to be out of turn 6. Oh dear, Marco Wittmann's got off into the gravel trap. I can see that is just coming into turn 16 opposite the commentary box, and looks like the German driver, who has been a 4-time winner at the Hockenheim in DTM, he's beached at the gravel trap at the moment, so yellow flags for now, but I think that car is going to need some recovery. And just to round off, sector 2 takes in the right-hander at turn 7, the left at turn 8, Mercedes curve, and then through turns 10 and 11. So it's a long sector, takes 49 seconds. Bortolotti quickest through there, full course yellow now, and Anjan Nguyen has been quickest through the last sector, which takes in the run into the final arena, turn 12, the Mobile 1 curve, which coming out of that is where you saw Clement Schmidt going off earlier, into the Sachs curve in front of the big grandstand here. The big, almost sweeping hairpin at turn 13, and then through turns 14, 15, 16 and 17, the sud curve back out onto the start-finish straight. That's where set BMW.
You saw him just in that replay at the top of the picture. It looked like he just got a couple of wheels on the curb, and the back end swapping ends with the front. So the drivers now need to be 80 kilometres an hour or lower. That is what a full course yellow means. So just cruising around. Some of them choosing to come into the pits. I can see one of the Durham Motorsport McLarens just peeling off into the pits at the moment, and there is Sheldon van der Linde just keeping below that 80 kilometres an hour. On this track, track, which is still greasy. The windscreen wipers are still going. I'm looking at the weather forecast. It's due to clear within the next hour, the rain is, and then it's due to remain dry for the rest of the weekend. I don't know how many drivers will stay out while this full course yellow is on. We've still got a little over a quarter of an hour left of this session. Probably still more information to be gathered, but at the moment, Marco Wittmann getting lifted from the gravel trap, and it looks as though his free practice one is over.
Yeah, just under 16 minutes left on the clock. So some stay out under full course yellow conditions. Others pop into the pit lane, including Sheldon van der Linde. And also that's Tim coming into the pits as well. So Mirko Bortolotti quickest, 1:48.775, a tenth quicker than Kelvin van der Linde. And then Eindjen Nguyen, the other driver that broke the 1:49 barrier with a 1:48.946. So there's only 2 tenths covering those 3 drivers. Luca Engstler, 4th quickest with a 1:49.5. Ron Pereira in 5th place with a 1:49.677. Only 8 thousandths behind him. Thomas Preining in 6th, double winner here last year. Ricardo Feller in 7th in the second Audi with a 1:49.758. And then with a 1:49.933, Jules Gounon on his DTM debut, 8th place, top Mercedes. And they're the only drivers sub 150 seconds. Lucas Auer 9th with a 1:50.02, and Jack Aitken in 10th, leading Ferrari with a 1:50.138 second lap. Mirko Bortolotti had just gone back out, I think, so he's out to full course yellow conditions. Looking out at the commentary box window, the telehandler is still connecting itself, attaching itself to the roll hoop bars of the BMW and Marco Wittmann. It's just being hoisted up into the air, and it's only going to be a short trip into the pit lane. There's actually a cut through between turn 16 and 17, so it can immediately turn right off the circuit and then drive straight into the pit lane. So it won't be long, I don't think, before we get action back up to full speed as we get our first proper look at Arjun Maini out on track, having his best season at DTM, currently running in 8th place in the championship, the second best of the Mercedes drivers in the championship standings, and having had his best weekend ever in the DTM, the Indian driver, last time out at the Red Bull Ring with a pair of podium finishes. Albeit the first one, Brian, was probably slightly disappointing because he'd started that race on pole position.
And it was in free practice that he was told to slow down.
Yeah.
So this is not qualified. One of the highlights of the season, of which there are many. Be good to see how he goes this weekend. I really like the last couple of weekends of the season because the fact is that everybody is out of the championship bar 3 drivers. So the rest of them, all they're interested in is either a win or at the very least a podium. And it gives a different dynamic because when we start in Oschersleben, everybody's a little bit, think of the bigger picture. Well, there is no bigger picture here. It's hell for leather, and we'll have 17 drivers who will say to the other 3, I don't care about your championship, I want to win this thing. And it gives us a very different kind of racing, often spectacular. So Arjun Maini, well, it was certainly an element of that at the Red Bull Ring. Those 2 podiums, it's the best we've seen him go. Great to see him on the podium. And the second podium that he had, really, that was very much on merit, and I'm sure it's the first of many.
And so Marco Wittmann was able to drive into the pit lane on his own in the end, as you've seen there. The telehandler pulled him out of the gravel, then popped him back down onto the track, and Marco comes in. So might actually get a chance to go back out again. Green flags waved with that situation being recovered. We're back up to full speed then, with about 2/3 of the cars out on track. Engstler, Auer, Tim, Vermeulen, Schmidt, and obviously Wittmann are the ones in the pits. Everybody else is currently out on the track. And not just about trying to get individual quick lap times, but trying to work on the longer setup as well. But again, as you said, Brian, if you know it's probably going to be dry for the rest of the weekend, then part of you's thinking, well, what are we learning really? But you never know with the weather this year. As I said, if it does suddenly rain, you don't want to be ill prepared for it either, do you?
I know, I am very surprised how many are still out on track, and I'm certainly not complaining. It is spectacular. Great to be at the Hockenheimring. Legendary German circuit, of course, hosted the Formula 1 Grand Prix but a few years ago, and we'd dearly love to see the German Grand Prix back on the calendar, but that's a whole nother topic. But yes, with 11.5 minutes remaining, looking good here, even in the rain. We get to do it all again this afternoon. Don't forget, 3:45 local time will be free practice 2, and I get the feeling we'll get a clearer picture, because if you say, what have we learned from this session? Well, probably not a lot at the moment. Yes, Championship leader Bortolotti is quickest. Yes, second in the championship, Kelvin van der Linde is... No, sorry, Bortolotti is quickest, Kelvin van der Linde second. But, as we say already, this is not really representative of what we might see later on.
And as ever, Ian Guin, he's going well in the wet. He bails for the pits at the end of that lap, but he's still third quickest overall, ahead of his teammate Thomas Preining, who is sixth. The Porsche's looking strong at the start of the weekend, but we're probably going to get very different conditions later on. Again, it's going to be a busy session, isn't it? If it is dry for the second free practice session, which is shorter anyway at 45 minutes rather than 55 for this first session, then it's going to be a busy track because they want to get as much data, as much time on track as possible in dry conditions, because that'll be their only chance to do so before what should be a dry qualifying session tomorrow morning, and a massive qualifying session that is going to be as well. Right, you can see Luca Engstler on screen. Let's hear from him now.
The session track should be clear, and be careful in track limits turn 1, we got hundreds of them.
You really have.
He has, hasn't he?
I'm going to count how many he's got, actually. You carry on.
Go on. How many fingers have you got?
2, 3, 4, 5, 6,
Right,
7,
boring
8,
hands,
9, 10.
extra fingers.
I'll make it 11 so far.
Just for Luca Engstler.
That's a Luca Engstler. Turn 1, and that's the tricky one. I 10 out of 10 for trying. The win that he had in the GT World Challenge European Sprint Cup, the Gold Sprint Cup champions, to remind you, along with Max Hofer. There's another legend that we'd love to see back here at the Hockenheimring soon. Has clearly gone to his head, and he's trying to get around the turn 1 very rapidly, not finding the adhesion that he needs. Let's see how he does this time. He's out along the pit straight. This is the corner where it's all been a little bit sticky, a bit of a wobble under braking. You see, he goes wide there, deep into the corner, then cuts back in, but clearly struggling to get the thing turned around into turn 1.
On the curves, we can't have all four wheels beyond the curves, where there's a flat curve on a exit to a corner. That's Luca Engstler finding and then going beyond the track limits. But as you say, Brian, it can be a really big thing this weekend, because it's always turn 1. That's where all the track limits infringements happen. And if you start losing lap times because of it in qualifying, that can ruin your weekend. I think back to last year, Saturday qualifying, Mirko Bortolotti going for the championship, puts in a lap time quick enough for pole position. The lap time is taken away for track limits. He winds up back in 8th place on the grid and can only finish 5th in the race, and then is pretty much out of the championship fight. Thomas Preining wins it the next day by snatching pole position in the second qualifying session. Had he kept that lap time, had he started on pole position, might have been a very different story.
And qualifying is critical with the field so close together. You need to start towards the front of the grid. I mean, René Rast might disagree with that. He's been famous for charging through this year. But realistically, Bortolotti, Kelvin van der Linde and Mauro Engel need to be in the first few rows. And as you say, a track limits infringement. And just to say, Luca Engstler, we saw him going into turn 1. That was another track limit infringement that popped up on our screen. This is Jack Aitken. I haven't seen any warnings for him yet. And there is Mauro Engel. Yes, doing a pirouette as well. He's found the slippery bit of the track.
It's turn 17.
17,
corner, yeah.
That's out on the drag strip. I said to you there was no traction out there. Mauro Engel will probably agree with me now.
Yeah, there's a lot of standing water offline as well, still, isn't there? So as he span through the puddles, very hard to knock the speed off. He didn't hit anything, which is critical, and rejoins and gets going again. Ruins one lap, ruins the start of the next as well as he gets up to speed, but no damage to the car. But yeah, tricky for Mauro, and it's very, very, very rare to see Mauro Engel spin, isn't it?
I'd have to say, 10 out of 10. I'd be back in the pits and I'd be having a stiff drink to try and calm down. I've just watched him flat out along the pit straight, having another look here into turn 16, and it looked like he was a bit late on the brakes, and you can see that is the aforementioned drag strip, which
ice
has
rink,
no...
isn't it?
It is, and I even try, when you walk on it, it feels like you're walking on ice. I'm not exaggerating, it is that slippery. But yeah, he's got straight back on it. He's out there again. Here we are on board. Oh, this is a replay of the same moment. What happened there? Did he just brake too late, or what?
Understeered a bit, didn't he?
Yeah,
just understeered a bit. Nothing major really. And any other corner, he'd have been absolutely fine, I think. But once you get dragged into that, it's, as you say, incredibly slippy offline. So, you know, you've learned something from that, and you know, it's from the mistakes that you learn, isn't it? So he knows now.
Yeah, but he doesn't do it again.
No, well, I'd say I'm racking my brain trying to think of a time I've seen Mauro Engel spin, and I can't think of one. It's so rare that he makes a mistake. He's Mr. Consistent, isn't he? He's such a, not just experienced and smooth and consistent driver, but also, of course, a mighty quick driver. On board with Thomas Preining then in the Manthey EMA Porsche. And he, at the moment, his last lap was 1:49.7, which was only half a tenth away from his best lap time. He's currently down to 7th place because we have had an improvement for Lucas Auer in the Mercedes. He's up to 4th place. But he's had a moment as well, and that sent him off into the gravel trap. Just about missed the barriers. And again, it was just understeer. Look at all the stuff he drags back onto the track there, all the gravel that comes back on. So, same corner, but he got away with it.
In the gravel last part, honestly, it's unacceptable. This grip, something is wrong with the tire. I don't know what, but only in turn 1 I'm like half a second slower than before. Because there is no grip front and rear, no entry, mid-turn exit.
Got no grip. Something's wrong, says Thomas Priding. I'm having to back off half a second into turn 1. So he's not happy with the car, even though lap time-wise it's been okay. He's in 7th place. He's not feeling on top of the car. In these conditions, you've got to feel like the car is going to do what you tell it to do, what you want it to do.
Yeah, I think quite a few of the other drivers might say they're lacking a grip as well. It looks proper tricky out there at the moment. My apologies to Jack Aitken. I said he hadn't had any track limit warnings, and almost immediately afterwards he had one. So there's the curse put on you, Jack. So yeah, that was turn 1. The latest of many. Also, Ricardo Fellas had a warning as well for that. But there's Thomas Priding after that moment, another to get straight back on it. Looking at a replay, and this is Kelvin van der Linde also doing a little bit of drifting as well. No, it's not. That's Ricardo Fella and his teammate doing a bit of drifting in the Audi, but he keeps it all pointing in the right direction, so nothing too dramatic there. This is Kelvin van der Linde.
He caught that well, didn't he, Ricardo? He just clipped the inside curve, didn't he, with the right side wheels on the car, and that just unsettled the car. But he caught it very nicely indeed. As you say, we're on board then with Kelvin van der Linde as he makes his way around. He's currently, his last lap was a pretty slow 1:51.5. His best lap was a 1:48.8. So he's just coming through into turn 12 now, the Mobile 1 curve. This gets very twitchy. It's very narrow on the exit of the curbs, using it then. And on the brakes down to 2nd gear, and around about 90 kilometres an hour in the dry at least for the Sachs curver, all the way back on yourself. And then this little left-right flick through turns 14 and 15, and then 16 and 17, which has been catching the drivers out of late. And there we go, Thomas Priding's off the road again. So that's him coming out of turn 8 and 9, having another wide moment. So Priding really struggling with the car in conditions that are less wet than they were at the start of the session. So you think, well, why isn't it grippier? And it's because it's become greasy now, and the wet tyres, the tread on the tyres and those Priding tyres isn't really doing what it's been designed to do. It's not clearing the surface water because there's not as much surface water, and with people going off and coming onto the road and dragging back on mud and gravel, it gets really horrible out there in these conditions.
I always think as a driver, these are the conditions they like the least as we look again at a replay of that, where it is neither wet nor dry. We need it to be either bone dry or properly chucking it down with rain, but these greasy conditions don't make for great racing and don't make for good handling, and you're not on full wet tyres. Well, you are on full wet tyres, but you don't want to be on full wet tyres. You can't be on slicks, and it's just that really horrible kind of weather condition. And I'm really hopeful, I'm optimistic this is the only session we will have to endure these conditions as we ride on board with Jack Aitken.
When it's wet, it's just predictable. So
yeah, absolutely.
Find the grip, but you know it kind of stays the same. As long as the weather, the rain stays fairly consistent, you know, right, that's where I've got to brake, that's how gently I've got to brake, that's where I've got to turn in. But the greasy conditions, it's so variable from lap to lap. If I was Thomas Priding, I'd go straight back to the garage and say, can I have a look at Ian Nguyen's data, please? Because he's gone 2nd quickest. While we're looking at Thomas Priding, his teammate go off the road. Nguyen's flying. He's only a 1/10 of a second behind Bortolotti now, so he's 2nd quickest. And the man you've just been watching with the onboard, and now look from the exterior camera, this is Jack Aitken. He's improved as well, 5th place now in the session with a 1:49.470. Another slightly disappointing weekend in the IMSA Sports Car Championship last weekend, where it finished 5th in the end, had some issues, but had managed to get his first pole in the IMSA Sports Car Championship. So a season which kind of fell away in America after a really promising start with multiple podiums at the start of the season. Jack not in the championship fight coming into this weekend, but he could well be one of the drivers to watch out for in the race here at Hockenheim. He certainly had some big battles last year. I remember a particularly big battle with him and Riccardo Fella and Mirko Bortolotti on the Saturday last year. So Jack will get stuck in, I'm sure, this weekend and want to end the 2024 campaign on a high.
Yeah, isn't it great having Jack part of this series? He has been a real character, somebody who brings some good humour, but also some great racing, some very wide eyes in these conditions, and a shrug of the shoulder. Well, yeah, what do you know?
I was a little talking to himself. All right, Jack.
That's all right, wasn't it?
That was quite an interesting line through the corner, but it was all right. Yeah.
He's won 3 times this year. He's very useful. I really hope we're going to see him back next year. Please, Jack, come back next year because we love having you on the grid. Brings a legion of British fans with him and a real character, as you have just seen from that shot.
Adrian Gouin might be about to go fastest in the session here with only 33 seconds left on the clock. Absolute best middle sector. He's certainly giving it full beans coming out of the last corner, all over the curbs, and he does it. He goes quickest in free practice by just under half a tenth of a second, 47 thousandths of a second. There's another driver who would love it to rain more this weekend because he always looks very sharp in the wet. I mean, he's very, very good at the dry as well, but excellent effort from Adrian Gouin. We haven't seen the best of Adrian Gouin yet. We know he's an excellent driver from his various championship titles in Porsche Carrera Cup racing. But as I say, an awful amount of bad luck at the start of this year. His second season in DTM, but he started to string together some results in the second half of the year. So another one to watch out for. Again, as you say, Brian, always the focus is on the championship contenders, but quite often it's somebody else that ends up winning the race on the final weekend of a season, isn't it?
Yes, and that may easily be the case tomorrow and Sunday as we ride once on board with Jack Aitken. So he's still pushing hard, isn't he? He's still trying to improve on that lap time. So P5 is probably as good as it's going to get for Jack Aitken, a 149.470, because the checkered flag is out. So everybody who's on a lap at the moment, it will count. Aitken crosses the line. I don't think this is going to be an improvement. He stays P5, 150.501 on that lap.
Thomas Priding on a knife edge, but he did dig out a better lap right at the end of the session to go 6th quickest. So a car which is very nervous and which he's not liking in these conditions, but he is quite a good driver, to say the least, Thomas Priding, so he's still able to get something out of it with the 6th place in the session. But it's his teammate, Adrian Gouin, that's going to end the session as the quickest driver in free practice 1 with a 148.728. This was the twitchy moment of Jack Aitken as he just corrected the car, just got one wheel on the grass on that run. That is a quick run through turns 14 and 15. It's 3rd gear, but through the first part of it, the left, you're at 145 kilometres an hour in the dry, and you're at 180 kilometres an hour through the second part of it. So it's almost, not quite a chicane, but it's a quick left-right sequence of corners before you go to the double right at the end of the lap. So for the 2 championship front runners, Bortolotti and van der Linde, 2nd and 3rd, a good start to the day. Let's hear from one of them now.
Okay, Mirko, well done. So we finished P2. Just half a tenth gap to Gouin. He just did it the last lap. And then 3rd is Kelvin, then our Aitken finding Engstler and Pereira. So well done. And please go to the scales.
Yep, race engineer happy with that. And as for the other championship contender, not such a good start to the weekend. Maro Engel with a rare off and a spin, only 13th place, 1.6 seconds off the pace. But nothing to worry about yet, because probably we're not going to get these conditions tomorrow, and maybe not even this afternoon. It should be dry for the rest of the weekend. We'll see. Adrian Gouin quickest then, 148.728 from Mirko Bortolotti and Kelvin van der Linde. Lucas Hauer improved late on to 4th. Jack Aitken likewise to go 5th. And Thomas Priding right at the end of the session improved to go 6th ahead of Luca Engstler and Franck Pereira, who were the quickest 2 in the private test in the wet last week. Riccardo Fella 9th, and Jules Gounon, an excellent effort for the Andorran-based Frenchman, in 10th place on his debut. Then 11th position was Nicky Tim, 12th was Arjun Maini, 13th, as I say, was Maro Engel, 14th place for Thierry Vermeulen, 15th Sheldon van der Linde, 16th René Rast, 17th Max Powell, 18th Marco Wittmann, and then the McLarens of Ben Durr and Clement Schmidt 19th and 20th. So disappointing session that once again for the BMWs, who of course are gunning for the team's title with Schubert. So Sheldon van der Linde, the best of the BMWs, but way back in 15th place. But again, maybe not too much to stress about there with the changed conditions on the horizon, and what should, or at least could be, a dry free practice 2, and what should be dry running tomorrow. So the local time here at Hockenheim is 12:18, just to give you a reference point wherever you're watching in the world. And at 3:45, that's when the second free practice session gets underway. We'll be on air 5 minutes before that to talk you through the build-up. But for now, let's have a look at the slow-mos of our top 3 drivers. Kelvin van der Linde, third quickest. Mirko Bortolotti, second quickest, both with satisfactory, more than satisfactory starts to the weekend. But Arjen Nguyen, who couldn't care less about championship points this weekend, starts off with a great effort, quickest of all, 1 minute 48.728 seconds for the Turkish driver aboard the Manthey EMA machine. So that session comes to an end. We'll see what the weather brings for the second free practice 2 session. But as I say, if it is dry, then we can expect, Brian, a lot of cars on track with one more chance to get set up for the qualifying session tomorrow.
Yes, just one more free practice session remaining this year. We look forward to seeing you then.